Do you own your own business, a small business maybe? How about a side gig? Do you have one of those? How about a hobby? A hobby that all of a sudden you're making money on. Do you know that there's some things that you can do to make your life better, more interesting, and even more profitable? We're going to learn about that on this week's episode of the State of Greater Western New York Report, which, as always, is brought to you by...
Each week, our community makes history. Each week, you make history. And each week, there's only one source to turn to for the first take on history. You know what that is? Subscribe to the Sentinel right now to discover the history being made in your own backyard. The Men in Honeylight Falls Lima Sentinel. More than just your news, it's your history. Welcome, everyone, to this edition of the State of Greater Western New York Report. Join us each episode as we discuss fantastic topics ranging from history to science to the strange and the wonderful, as well as the treasured spirit with which our region has infused America. We challenge you to consider all things Greater Western New York, from our region's very beginnings to how it inspires, how it empowers, and why it is so admired. Here's the host of the State of Greater Western New York Report, Chris Carosa.
Welcome, everyone, to this week's version of the State of Greater Western New York Report. I'm Chris Carosa. With me today is Duane Whitmer. He's an accountant, and he's going to be telling us the magic of math when it comes to counting your money in whether it's your business, gig, hobby that makes money, anything that money comes in. Duane's the guy to talk to about it. Duane, how are you doing this morning? Or this afternoon? I forget what time it is.
I'm doing great. Wish it was a little warmer and not so rainy, but whatever. It's Western New York. But yeah, we're doing pretty well over here. So having a good day.
Well, let's get right into it. Let's talk about why it's important to keep track of the accounting figures in your business. What kind of information can you glean from that? And how does that sort of direct what you should be doing in the future?
Yeah. So, I'm the owner of Whitmer Accounting and Tax. We're an accounting firm. We have an office in Franklinville, Hamburg, and soon to be potentially Derby, New York. We're expanding. And we specialize in small businesses, startup companies, handful of employees, and we do, full-size accounting firm. So we do full-scale accounting firm, pardon me. We do accounting, bookkeeping, consulting, tax preparation, payroll. And so this where we're focusing on the bookkeeping and accounting side of things. And we do a lot of meetings with a lot of clients that are starting a new business, and they're confused. They don't know what to do. A lot of people, they don't have business degrees. They didn't go to school and spend hours taking business classes. It's you have a skill. The skill is marketable. You want people to pay you to do said skill, whether it's contracting, plumbing, you're a doctor, you're a social worker. You have some form of skill that you can sell to people to give you money, and you want to start a business. And so we work with them to help them explain how to make sure when you do that, you can keep the business open while paying your bills. So that's kind of a lot of what we do here, especially after tax season. Tax season gets pretty hectic, but now going into the spring, summer, and fall, it's a lot of consulting and working with these small businesses to make sure that they're doing the best they can to keep their doors open, especially amidst the issues you're seeing with the economy and stuff.
So if you're a small business owner, you're absolutely right, by the way. There's this process or theme or whatever it's called, E-Myth. It goes back several decades now. And I remember when I read the book, I think a guy by the name of Michael Gerber wrote it. The thing that struck me is when you're starting a business, you often will gravitate towards the things that you're most comfortable doing. And those usually aren't the things that make you money. So it's the operational matters, maybe even the accounting, the ledger sheets, things that are fairly easy and rote, easy in a sense, within a very limited way, but they're not the things that you get paid for. And the idea is that you want to really delegate that out, either bring somebody in-house for some matters like filing and things like that, or hire a third party like an accountant to help you really put those numbers in a way that's meaningful. So let's first talk about the process of hiring an accountant. What should small business owners look for? How do you interview an accountant? And ultimately, what should be the key to making your decision?
So one thing that we deal with small businesses, and this is kind of a struggle, is it's one of two things are really an issue: cost and control. If you're a small business owner, you're used to doing everything on your own. You're used to doing it all. You're the salesman, you're the laborer, you're the secretary, you're the data entry person, you're the receptionist. So you're used to doing it all on your own. So you're a little bit leery to give someone control of the finances or give them information. And the other thing is, cost. If you're a small business and your money's tight, you want to make sure you're putting all your money where it needs to go. So that is something we see with companies, and also time. Again, like I said, if you're the small business owner, you're wearing a bunch of different hats, and a lot of times things that aren't making you money get put aside: the filing, the data entry, the bookkeeping, and it is important. So if you're looking to hire an accountant, what I do is, when we expand into the new office, there's going to be a conference room, and we're going to do seminars on this. A lot of clients laugh at me because I don't always sell my services, and necessarily because sometimes if you have the time and ability, you can do your accounting yourself. If you are going to outsource, if you are going to hire an accountant, I do recommend um, a very frank, upfront conversation. What you're looking to spend. And what you need service wise. Some of my clients say, I only can spend a certain amount of money. And I say, we can't make that work. Let's see if we can help you in a different way. Let's see if we can find someone who can make it work. Um, you know, expect, X prices, ask their qualifications, ask if they're insured. One thing to be on the lookout for is to save money. A lot of clients and a lot of people will hire cheaper services. And unfortunately, one of the downsides of that is, if they're not licensed, if they're not insured, if they're not part of an organization, we do see a lot of theft. We do see a lot of errors being made. We see a lot of lackadaisical stuff. We're actually doing work with a client right now he owns a company. He hired like his girlfriend's friend to do some of the bookkeeping. And it was a part-time thing for her. She was doing it on the side, so she just wasn't doing it. She hasn't done it for like 6 months. So her tax, she has actually over a year now. She only did for the first 6 or 7 months of 2021. So his taxes can't get done. So we're rebuilding the financial statements on that. So, expect to see reporting. You're going to want to see reporting. I say, hey, I want a quarterly report. I want a monthly report, whatever you're paying. Make sure there's a contract where you know what you're getting for the cost.
Let's talk about a specific example where someone is got their small business and they come to you asking for you to do it or to do the surface, but it's clearly something that they don't need to hire you, that they could do themselves. What's an example of something like that?
Um, so a good example. Sorry, I'm reading my notes here. A good example would be, we do work with a handful of clients who, if you're in retail, um, and you're in an office from 9 to 5 or 10 to 8 or whatever your hours are. Um, if you have some downtime, you can run it yourself. You can do your own bookkeeping. You can do your own accounting. There are systems online, QuickBooks, Zero. There's another firm I'm forgetting. You can do it yourself. A lot of the online stuff makes it pretty simple to do. And part of our sales program is, look, we'll tell you what we can do. We'll give you a price. And if you say, hey, it's too much, I don't like to oversell or force people to buy my product, because if they feel they're overpaying for something, they're not going to be appreciative. They might not come back. They may, leave. So what I usually do is we provide QuickBooks training. I'm a licensed QuickBooks Pro or whatever I don't know. There was some training they offered that I took that, I'm licensed to train people in QuickBooks. I'm licensed to, help people get that set up. So we'll go in and we'll set up the program for you. We've done trainings where, we'll come in and we'll sit down with your bookkeeper for a couple hours and walk her through the process, walk them through the program. we'll sit down with you and do that. So, if you have the time to do it on your own, you should do that. It's, I'm not about forcing people to spend money they don't have to spend. And, we do provide the service of helping people get set up so they can do it on their own. So
So,
that's
so
what we do
let's
here.
let's flip the question now to the other side, and that is, give an example of something that a small business owner thinks they can do themselves, but really is better off not doing themselves.
So it depends on your industry. It depends on your business. And it depends on your time. Look, one of the reasons why my business does so well and why we're able to get clients is because we sit down and have a pretty frank conversation. When you're doing the bookkeeping, when you're doing your finances, you're doing it for free. You're not getting paid for it. So it's a cost value analysis. If you spend 8 hours a month doing your bookkeeping, and that's a day a month, you're losing a day of month of doing billing. If you make more than we bill you for that work, you're actually losing money by doing this. It's there's a term for it, and I'm drawing a blank right now, and I didn't write it down, but it's like substitution of cost. I don't think that's it, but essentially saying, if doing free work costs you money or time, if you have a family, you have a wife, you have kids, you want to spend time with them, there's that theory of cost, but also if you have inventory, if you're in retail, if you're in manufacturing, there are some niches that, cost accounting and stuff that, if you don't know how to do, and I'll actually give you an example of this one. Sometimes you can get in trouble. One of my clients that I'm still working on, he owned a manufacturing company and wasn't doing any accounting and wasn't really tracking what he was making. And so he hired us. The issue we had, and this is a pitfall of why you should be doing bookkeeping, is because 5 years ago he was making X amount of dollars. He was profitable. He was paying all of his bills. His paycheck was nice. He enjoyed it. 3 years ago, all of a sudden, he noticed that sometimes money was tighter than he'd like for it to be, and he had to take a pay cut. And then about a year ago, he noticed that there were sometimes he wasn't taking a paycheck. So we sat down with him and realized that inflation happens and costs go up. And over the last 5 years, his prices stayed the same, but his payroll costs, his material costs, and his overhead costs doubled. So in some of the things he was selling, he was actually spending more money manufacturing, shipping, and selling it than he was in people buying it. So if he charged $800 for a piece of equipment, it cost him $900 to make it and sell it and ship it. So he was actually losing money on some of his big selling items. So we sat down with him and we actually caught him just in time. There was a bankruptcy scare. We caught him just in time to realize he had to raise his prices significantly over the next year or two. I mean, he couldn't do it all at once because then he'd lose, business, but he had to raise his prices. So it kind of tracking, you can't be complacent when it comes to, what you're charging. Restaurants see this all the time. If anyone's gone out to eat anytime recently, you've noticed food prices have gone up. And, restaurants have to be very, very careful with this because these costs change almost every day. So, these are things you either want to make sure you're on top of or hire someone to help you with, because this determines whether or not you can keep your doors open and whether or not you can feed your family. So these are things that, if you don't know, you're going to want to find a professional just to make sure you can survive.
It sounds like maybe a potential triggering mechanism if you're small and starting off and you've been doing things on your own for a while, is if you do start noticing these tweaks in what's going on with your income, with your net coming in, that should be a warning signal that maybe you ought to bring in a professional to at least take a look at it and render some advice. We'll talk a little bit more about some surprising benefits that you can get with accountants who know a little bit more about the tax code than you do. We'll be right back after this message.
Through the mists of time, nature and man have both created and buried treasures beyond the imagination. With the ages, these riches slowly dissolve into mere myths until they are forever forgotten. But there are those brave souls who tirelessly cling to the truth, ever seeking to discover the undiscovered, to reveal what has always been there, to uncover the hidden gems of a land thought forsaken but loved by millions. 50 Hidden Gems of Greater Western New York. Discover the secrets in your own backyard. Buy your copy now at 50hiddengems.com.
Welcome back to the State of Greater Western New York Report. Today we're talking with Duane Whitmer, an accountant with Whitmer Accounting and Tax, LLC, and he's telling us a little bit about what you should be looking for when it comes time to choose an accountant. Now I'm going to turn the subject of the matter on a little bit. This is the scarier sort of thing. So, Duane, you've got a lot of experience with tax law or taxes. Tell us something that's caught people by surprise, that they weren't expecting with regard with their taxes, that they might have been able to prevent if they were proactive, and tell us what they had to do about it to fix it.
So there's a couple things with this. First thing, one issue that I have is I'm not a big fan of social media. I'm not a big fan of I know it's like free information exchange, but a lot of people don't vet the information they get. And there's a lot of things out there, and I deal with this a lot where I'll get a client that'll come in and say, well, my cousin does this or my friend does that. Well, every situation is different. Every situation varies. So one of the things we expanded into pretty heavily is I'm registered to represent people in front of the IRS, and part of our expansion that we're undergoing is getting more into a representation in front of the IRS, something called audit defense, where we're preparing you. Essentially, me and my associates will come in and we'll be the auditing agency, and we'll audit your books, we'll ask the questions, and we'll kind of give you a score based on how we think you'll fare in an audit. How was your record keeping? How was the what you're doing? What do we think your potential missing liability is? And a lot of times we get, hey, my friend says we can do this. Well, yeah, your friend says you can do it, but your friend says you can do 100 miles an hour through a school zone while shooting guns in the air. It doesn't mean you can do it. Maybe you get away with it. Maybe the cops are there and you get caught. It's a risk. So, really explaining those risks and really explaining what happens. Unfortunately, one of the things we do in our representation is every year we'll deal with someone who, well, I let my mother-in-law do my taxes and she screwed them up. Well, yeah, that happens. Let's sit down and see what happened. Let's sit down and see, is it fixable? Or, sometimes it's not, and you're wrong and you got to pay the tax bill. People who do their own taxes, unfortunately, sometimes they make mistakes, and it's sitting down and going through that. And a lot of times with social media and stuff, there's videos online that have partial truths to it. Or one issue we're dealing with is coming out of COVID. There's these credits that are available, and there's a credit that's available. It's up to $64,000. So a lot of people are marketing that like, oh, you could get $64,000. You can get $64,000, and explaining to the client, yes, the credit goes up to $64,000. You qualified for $2,800. That's it. The marketing gimmicks that these places use. TurboTax was just sued for marketing gimmicks. There's a lot of marketing gimmicks that people use that are technically true, but not And it's dependent on your situation, and every situation is different. So those are things to be on the lookout for. One thing we're dealing with now is because of COVID, there was the stimulus checks, and that's a whole nother mess. I could talk for hours on the mess that was the stimulus program and the just issues with that. But some softwares are assuming you didn't get your rebate until the very end. And why they're doing that is because it looks like you're getting a higher refund. And so then at the very, very end, they'll ask the question, your refund goes down. And that's led to some issues because I have clients that'll start their own, they'll start it on their own, they'll do it on their own and see if it's close, or, they just want to see if they can do it. And that argument of, well, the system was waiting for the right moment to drop this. There's a lot of stuff like that out there too that you have to be aware of.
So let's talk about the situation where a parent owns a business and they have minor children. There are some tax advantages that they could access in certain circumstances when they hire their own children, their own minor children. Can you kind of give us examples of what those would be? And if a parent is establishing a business, how should that business be established to best take advantage of this?
So if you're going to do something like this, it's definitely beneficial to sit down with an accountant because one issue that I have is I'll sit down with a client and we'll do a cost benefit analysis. So one thing we do is, maybe the client's a single member LLC, but we want to shift him to a corporation and he can save money if he does X, Y, and Z, or maybe shifting to being taxed as an S corp is beneficial because you got to do ABC. The problem is you have to actually do it, if that makes sense. So we do a lot of work with a client. We'll sit down and say, okay, you're currently a single member LLC. You're getting crushed with self-employment taxes. If you restructure to a corporation, you can do these things and it saves you $12,000 a year in taxes. If you don't do those things, you don't save the money. So, yes, there are ways you can, hire your children for a part-time job to do some basic entry, data entry or office work or whatever they want to do. It is all legal, but there is an extra cost involved. There's a cost of payroll, there's the cost of employment, there's the unemployment insurance. So there are additional costs, especially in New York State, that are going to come into play. Workers' comp, disability, payroll taxes. So you want to make sure you're sitting with someone and saying, hey, if I do this, what are my savings? Sometimes there are savings, sometimes they're not as much as you think they'd be. Every situation is different. So are there people that can do that and save significant money? Yes, absolutely. Are there people who can do that, but maybe they can't afford to pay the kids without taking a pay cut themselves or, something else? Well, then, that impacts your savings. So, there are these things you can do. And I would suggest if you're interested in those, you should definitely reach out and have someone prepare a cost benefit analysis and make a plan with you so you can do those and you know what the savings is going to be. Because I've seen people, try to take advantage of loopholes, try to take advantage of certain things out there and just never do it. And now you're paying more money for something you didn't take advantage of. And now it actually costs you money. So, that's something to be aware of.
If there was a book or anything like that somebody could read just to kind of get familiar with what they need to be talking to their accountant about, what would you suggest they take a look at?
You know what? I don't know. I was just in another interview and someone asked me what books I read, and I haven't read. I've been terrible. I haven't read many books recently. I think the best thing to do is, this is probably contradictory advice from other people, and I'll explain my logic is, having a mentor is good. Having someone you can ask questions to is good, but make sure they're in the same industry and make sure they have the same issues you may face. So one thing I see a lot is, my client owns a restaurant and he's asking his friend who's, an insurance salesman questions. Well, those are two different industries. You're going to have two completely different, issues you're going to face. One has to do sales tax, one doesn't. One has overhead and inventory, one doesn't. One's in services, one's in the restaurant industry. So it's two different, situations. So as far as reading, I don't know. I'll have to find something and get back to you on that, because I don't really. I should find like a good book on how to start a business, or kind of what you should do. I recommend a lot of, like, as bad as it sounds, trial and error. Um, every situation is different. Every person is different, but making sure that you're tracking what's coming in, what's coming out, and making sure you're profitable is something that you should always be doing. Um, but yeah, as far as books, I don't really know. I read, this is embarrassing, but I actually read, those like books for dummies. I was at Barnes and Noble one day. This is like 10 years ago, and I actually read like Starting a Business for Dummies, and that was actually a pretty good resource. Um, it was basic and it didn't really go too in depth, but it was actually a pretty solid. It gave me a good idea, and something like that wouldn't be a bad start.
We just have time for one more question. We're getting it from the audience. And can you quickly explain the tax difference between an S Corp and a C Corp? I guess they're looking into maybe incorporating their business and they want to know what the difference is.
So, so there's a huge issue with S corps, and that is, a corporation can be taxed in two different ways. A C corporation is its own separate entity that pays taxes. I'll use round numbers. Money comes in, you make $50,000. The corporate tax rate's 21%. You pay 21% on $50,000 in profits, which is $10,200. Boom, done. An S corp, which is a subchapter S of the corporate tax code, profits flow through to the shareholders. So say you're the only shareholder, your personal return would claim that $50,000, and then you'd be personally liable for the tax. There are pros and cons to each thing. That's another example of, if you're thinking C Corp versus S Corp, sitting down with someone and making sure you are actually taking advantage of the benefits that are out there. Because if not, you're actually going to, again, cost yourself more money. But yeah, the difference between the C Corp and S Corp is how they are taxed. One is a standalone entity. The C Corp is the standalone entity, and the S Corp, profits and losses flow through to the shareholders. So it's a tax structure. One issue with the S Corp is, and this is actually a great example of the IRS code. You have to pay a reasonable salary to officers of an S Corp before they take interest, draws, dividends, etc. But the IRS doesn't specify what a reasonable salary is. We've represented people in the past about this, and we've won more than we've lost, but we've never gotten good guidance on it. So it's a weird situation.
All right. Duane, thank you very much. Very insightful information for small businesses, or, like I said, a side hustle you might have, or even a hobby that makes money for you, how you need to deal with it. Sounds like, as with many things, it really starts with a conversation with someone who's expert in the types of questions, the accounting questions that you have. Well, if you have questions, like we just saw someone from our audience ask, you can watch this show live every Thursday at noon and ask your question right there. I'll read it to the guest, and the guest will answer the question. How do you do that? It's pretty simple. You just go to our website and you sign up for free. It's stateof.greaterwesternnewyork.com. It just took me a while to get it up on the screen. Just go there. There's a little thing that says, hey, yeah, I want to be invited to these shows. Every Thursday morning, you'll get an invitation with the link on how to attend the show. And within that link in the chat room, it's a Zoom link, you can just ask the question and voila, you'll get the answer live right in front of you. If you can't see the show, don't worry. If you can't see it live, that's fine. It's archived on our website, stateofgreaterwesternnewyork.com, and it's also available every Sunday at 1:30 on our Facebook page and YouTube channel. If you watch it on the Facebook page, be sure to like it, because when you do that, it'll tell you when the show is airing. Same thing on the YouTube channel. Subscribe to that, and as soon as the show starts, you'll get a message on your phone or other device saying, hey, the State of Greater Western New York report is on. Maybe you should watch it and see. So, Duane, thank you very much. Thank you for being part of today's show. And I'm sure we'll talk to you more in the later. All right. Bye-bye for now.